My son banned me from his wedding, but had the audacity to send me a bill for $300,000 to cover the costs of his party and honeymoon. He even cheekily added a note saying, "Be thankful I let you contribute to our happiness." I just smiled, picked up my pen, and turned his dream wedding into a living nightmare. Before I tell you how I taught my entitled son and his gold-digger fiancée a lesson they will never forget, let me know which city you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to cut off a toxic family member to save your own sanity. My name is Clint Reeves, and at 69 years old, I thought I had seen every level of greed the construction industry could throw at me. I was wrong. The worst kind of greed does not come from corrupt city officials or shady contractors. It comes from the people you share your blood with. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of gray, overcast day in Seattle that usually makes my arthritis flare up. I was sitting in my home office, a room lined with mahogany bookshelves that smelled of old paper and pipe tobacco. I built this house with my own 2 hands 40 years ago, back when my late wife Patricia and I were counting pennies to buy lumber. A courier had just dropped off a thick, heavy envelope from a company called Elite Events. The logo was embossed in gold leaf, screaming pretension. I slit the envelope open with my letter opener, expecting an invitation. After all, my only son Bradley was getting married in 3 weeks. We had not spoken much lately, mostly because his fiancée Sienna found my presence overwhelming. But surely a father gets an invite to his son's wedding. I pulled out the contents. There was no invitation. There was no card with heartfelt words. There was only a single stapled document, an invoice. My eyes scanned the header. Invoice number 4092. Billed to Clint Reeves. Due date immediate. I put on my reading glasses, thinking there must be a mistake. My eyes drifted down the line items and my breath caught in my throat. This was not a mistake. It was a ransom note disguised as a bill. The total amount at the bottom was bolded in red ink. $315,400. I blinked, rubbing my eyes, but the numbers remained. I began to read the breakdown, and with every line, the blood in my veins turned a little colder. First item: venue rental, Napa Valley Reserve, $45,000. Second item: custom Vera Wang bridal gown, $12,000. I let out a dry, humorless laugh. Patricia had married me in a dress she sewed herself from fabric we bought at a discount bin. She looked like a queen. Sienna needed $12,000 to look halfway decent. The list went on. Imported French champagne, $8,000. Floral arrangements, $15,000. A live jazz band, $10,000. First-class tickets to the Maldives for the honeymoon, $25,000. But it was the last item on the list that made my hands shake. Not from age, but from pure, unadulterated rage. Item number 24. Absence contribution fee, $50,000. I read it again. Absence contribution fee. Next to it was a handwritten note in Bradley's distinct, loopy handwriting. The note read, "Dad, Sienna and I think your presence would clash with the vibe we are going for. You are a bit too old school for the influencer crowd Sienna invited, but you can still be a good father. Pay this bill so we can have the wedding we deserve. Be thankful I let you contribute. Don't let me down." I set the paper down on my oak desk. The silence in the room was deafening. I looked around at the photos on my shelves. Photos of me holding Bradley when he was a baby. Photos of me teaching him to ride a bike. Photos of his college graduation, which I paid for in full. I had created this. I had shielded him from the harshness of the world, never letting him know what it felt like to work a 12-hour shift in the rain or to eat cold sandwiches for dinner because the electricity had been cut off. I gave him everything I never had, and in return, he viewed me not as a father, but as an ATM machine that was malfunctioning because it wanted to show up in person. The term absence contribution fee kept echoing in my mind. They were charging me $50,000 for the privilege of not attending. They wanted my money, but they was ashamed of the man who earned it. I felt a sharp pain in my chest, a mixture of heartbreak and betrayal, but I pushed it down. In my line of work, you cannot afford to be emotional when someone is trying to rip you off. You have to be cold. You have to be calculated. I picked up my phone. My thumb hovered over Bradley's contact. I needed to hear him say it. I needed to hear the disrespect in his voice to confirm that the son I raised was truly gone. I dialed. The phone rang 4 times before he picked up. In the background, I could hear the thumping bass of electronic dance music and the clinking of glasses. It was 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. "Hey, Dad." Bradley's voice was loud, slurring slightly. "Did you get the mail?" Sienna was worried the courier might get lost. You know how incompetent people are these days. I leaned back in my leather chair, clutching the invoice so hard the paper crinkled. "I got it, Bradley. I am looking at it right now. $300,000 and a $50,000 fee for not coming." "Is this a joke?" "A joke," Bradley laughed, a sound that grated on my nerves. "No, Dad. It is simple math. Sienna is an influencer. Her brand is all about youth luxury and modern aesthetics. No offense, but you showing up in your old suits talking about construction sites and the good old days, it just kills the vibe. You would be sitting there looking like a relic. We are doing you a favor. You hate parties anyway." I felt a vein throb in my temple. I hate parties full of fake people, yes. But this is your wedding. I am your father. I paid for that engagement ring. I paid for the down payment on your condo. And now I am banned. Bradley sighed, the sound of a spoiled child being asked to clean his room. "Look, don't make this dramatic. You always make everything about you. This is Sienna's day. She has sponsors watching the live stream. She cannot have anything off-brand. And honestly, $50,000 is cheap for the peace of mind you get, knowing you helped us. Consider it a final gift before you retire, and go do whatever old people do." The casual cruelty in his voice was breathtaking. He spoke of me as if I were a distant relative he was forced to tolerate. Not the man who sat by his bedside when he had pneumonia, not the man who taught him how to tie a tie. So I said, keeping my voice steady, fighting the urge to scream. "If I don't pay this, what happens?" Bradley's tone shifted. It became sharper, more menacing. "Then do not expect to see us again. And Sienna, well, she has a lot of followers, Dad. She might just have to go on Instagram and tell her story about how her billionaire father-in-law abandoned his son on his wedding day. You know how the internet loves a villain. Do you really want that hassle at your age? Just pay the bill. It is tax deductible or something, right? You have plenty of money. Stop being a miser." He hung up. The line went dead. I sat there holding the phone, listening to the silence of the house that was once filled with laughter. I looked at the picture of Patricia on my desk. She was smiling, holding a 5-year-old Bradley on her lap. She had made me promise on her deathbed to always take care of him, to ensure he never suffered. I had kept that promise. I had protected him from suffering so well that he had never learned the value of anything. He thought money grew on trees, and that respect was an outdated concept. I looked at the invoice again. The red numbers seemed to mock me. "Be thankful I let you contribute." That sentence burned into my retinas. He was using my love for him as a weapon. He was using the memory of his mother as leverage. He thought I was a weak old man who would pay anything just to keep the peace, just to avoid being cut off. He thought I was desperate for his affection. Slowly I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the rain was coming down harder, washing the grime off the streets. I saw my reflection in the glass. I did not look like a relic. I looked like a man who had just survived a demolition. I looked at my hands. These hands had poured concrete framed houses and signed multi-million-dollar contracts. These hands had built a legacy, And I would be damned if I let that legacy be squandered on a $300,000 party for two people who wished I was dead. I walked back to my desk, opened the top drawer, and pulled out my checkbook. But I also pulled out something else. A black notebook where I kept the contact information for my lawyer Jerome and a private investigator named Vance. Bradley wanted a contribution. He wanted me to play my part. Fine. I would play my part. I would pay the bill. But in business, when you pay for something, you own it. And if the product is defective, you have the right to dismantle it. I picked up the invoice and smoothed it out on the desk. I was not going to get angry. Anger is messy. Anger makes you make mistakes. I was going to get even. I was going to give them exactly what they asked for, and it would destroy them. I reached for the phone again, but this time I wasn't calling my son. I was calling Jerome. It was time to look at the trust fund. It was time to look at the company car Bradley was driving. It was time to look at every single cent I had ever given him. The boy wanted a check. I would give him one. But he forgot that checks can bounce and fathers can bite back. As I dialed Jerome's number, a cold, calm smile spread across my face. The sadness was gone. The nostalgia was gone. All that was left was the ruthlessness that had made me the best contractor in the state. If they wanted a show, I would give them a show. But the script was about to change. "Jerome," I said when he answered, "don't ask me how I am. I need you to pull Bradley's trust fund agreement. Yes, the one with the morality clause. And get Vance on the line. I have a job for him regarding a certain influencer. We are going to war." I hung up and looked at the invoice one last time. $300,000. A small price to pay for the truth. This wasn't just a wedding bill anymore. It was the price of admission to the greatest lesson of their lives. I sat down, dipped my pen in the inkwell, and prepared to sign my name, but not on the check. Not yet. First, I had a little digging to do. The game had just begun. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor of the Rainier Tower was silent. I watched the numbers climb, feeling the pressure in my ears pop, but the pressure in my chest remained heavy. I was not here to visit a friend. I was here to consult a weapon. Jerome Vance has been my attorney for 30 years. He is a man who wears three-piece suits like armor and views emotions as unnecessary liabilities in the pursuit of victory. He had buried my competitors in paperwork back in the 90s, and he had helped me navigate the legal nightmare of Patricia's estate when she passed. Now I needed him to help me perform a different kind of surgery. I needed him to cut the cancer out of my finances. When I walked into his corner office, the view of the Seattle skyline was breathtaking gray clouds swirling around the skyscrapers like sharks in a tank. Jerome did not stand up to greet me. He simply pointed to the leather chair opposite his desk and poured 2 fingers of scotch into a crystal glass. He knew why I was here. I had sent him a scan of the wedding invoice on my way over. "You have raised a bold son," Clint Jerome said, his voice smooth and deep like gravel grinding in a mixer. "I have seen hostile takeovers with more politeness than that invoice. $50,000 for an absence fee. That is a new low even for the entitlement generation." I took the glass he offered, but did not drink. I placed the hard copy of the invoice on his desk, right on top of a stack of legal briefs. "It is not just boldness, Jerome. It is a declaration of war. He thinks I am a senile old man who will pay for peace. He thinks the Reeves name is a credit card with no limit. I need you to show me the trust fund agreement, the one we drafted when he turned 21. Jerome nodded and tapped a few keys on his laptop. The printer in the corner whirred to life, spitting out a thick document. Jerome slid it across the obsidian desk. I picked it up, the paper feeling heavy in my hands. This was not just a legal document. It was a safety net I had woven to protect Bradley from himself, a net he had treated like a hammock. Page 14, Jerome said, anticipating my question. "The morality and competence clause. We put it in there after his second DUI in college. It states that the beneficiary must maintain a standard of conduct that does not bring disrepute to the family name or the family business. It also stipulates that any evidence of financial mismanagement or criminal activity allows the trustee, which is you, to freeze all assets immediately without a court order. I read the words. They were cold, precise, and perfect. Financial mismanagement. I looked up at Jerome. Let's talk about the car. The Porsche 911 he is driving. The one he posted on Instagram yesterday with the caption, "Oh, toy." Jerome's eyes narrowed. He pulled up another file on his screen. The Porsche is technically a company asset, Clint. We leased it through Reeves Construction for business development purposes. Bradley is listed as a junior development officer. He is supposed to use it to meet clients and visit sites. I leaned forward. And when was the last time my son visited a construction site? Jerome scrolled through the logs. According to the GPS tracker installed in the vehicle for insurance purposes, the car has not been near a construction site in 6 months. However, it has been parked frequently at the Valhalla nightclub, the Napa Valley Reserve, and several high-end casinos in Las Vegas. I felt a surge of validation mixed with disgust. So he is using a company asset for personal leisure while claiming it as a business expense. That is tax fraud, Jerome. If the IRS audits us, I go to jail. He is exposing the company to liability just to look rich for his friends. It gets worse, Jerome said, his face devoid of sympathy. He flipped a page in his file. I took the liberty of pulling the statements for the supplementary American Express card you gave him. The black card. You authorized it for emergencies and travel expenses related to the business. I nodded. I remembered giving him that card. I told him it was for emergencies only. A hospital bill. A flight home if he was stranded. Jerome slid a spreadsheet across the desk. The numbers were staggering. In the last 3 months alone, there were $40,000 in charges. None of them were emergencies. There was a charge for $5,000 at a luxury handbag store in Los Angeles, another $3,000 at a spa in Beverly Hills, $12,000 for VIP tables at a club in Miami. This is not Bradley, I said quietly, my finger tracing the line item for the handbag. Bradley doesn't know the difference between a Birkin and a backpack. This is Sienna. Jerome nodded slowly. It appears your future daughter-in-law has been using your son's supplementary card as her personal piggy bank. Since she is not an employee of Reeves Construction and not a family member, yet this is unauthorized use of corporate funds. In legal terms, Clint, this is theft. And since Bradley gave her the card, he is an accessory to embezzlement. The room fell silent. The hum of the air conditioner seemed to get louder. I looked at the evidence spread out before me. My son wasn't just ungrateful. He was a criminal. He was stealing from the very hands that fed him, and he was letting a woman who despised me spend my hard-earned money on vanity. I sat back in the chair, the leather creaking. I remembered the days I spent on scaffolding, eating cold sandwiches, saving every dollar, so Bradley could have a better life. I remembered the callous way he told me to pay the bill and stay away. He didn't just want my money. He felt entitled to it. He thought he was smarter than me. He thought the old man was too tired to check the books. Jerome watched me carefully. You have a choice, Clint. We can treat this as a family matter. We can cut off the card, take back the car, and give him a stern lecture. Or we can treat this as a business matter. I stood up and walked to the window looking down at the city below. People looked like ants from up here. For too long I had let Bradley treat me like an ant. I turned back to Jerome. This is not a family matter, I said, my voice steady and cold. Family does not blackmail you with wedding invitations. Family does not steal from you. This is a business matter. Draft the papers, Jerome. I want the trust fund frozen effective immediately. I want a repossession order for the Porsche. And I want you to prepare a lawsuit against Sienna for credit card fraud and unjust enrichment. Jerome's eyebrows raised slightly, the only sign of surprise he ever showed. You realize this will nuke the wedding, Clint. If we freeze the assets and file these motions, everything stops. The venue, the vendors, the honeymoon. They will be humiliated publicly. I picked up the wedding invoice from the desk and tore it slowly in half. Then I tore it again, dropping the pieces into the wastebasket. They wanted a contribution, I said. I am contributing a lesson in reality. They want to live like adults. Then they can face the consequences like adults. Do not file the papers yet, Jerome. Let them think the money is coming. Let them enjoy their rehearsal dinner. I want the hammer to drop when they are standing at the altar of their own ego. I want the police to serve the papers when the cameras are rolling. Jerome allowed a small, shark-like smile to touch his lips. He opened his laptop again. I will have the filings ready for Saturday morning. You might want to hire private security, Clint. When this hits, the fallout will be radioactive. I buttoned my jacket. I built skyscrapers in the middle of storms, Jerome. I can handle a tantrum from a spoilt brat and an Instagram model. Just make sure the paperwork is bulletproof. I want them to have nothing left but each other. Let's see how long their true love lasts when the credit limit hits 0. I walked out of the office without looking back. The elevator ride down felt faster. The pressure in my chest was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I had my strategy. I had my weapons. And I had the truth. The check was in the mail, all right. But it wasn't the one they were expecting. It was a bill for 28 years of ungratefulness, and I was coming to collect. Jerome's office door opened and Vance walked in. Vance was a man who looked like he had been carved out of granite and left out in the rain for too long. He did not smile. He did not offer pleasantries. In his line of work, a smile usually meant you missed something. He carried a flash drive in one hand and a manila folder in the other. He placed them on the desk with a heavy thud that sounded like a coffin lid closing. I have seen a lot of bad things in 20 years of private investigation, Clint Vance said, his voice raspy from years of chain smoking. I have seen spouses with second families. I have seen executives embezzling millions to pay for gambling debts. But this girl, Sienna, she is a special kind of predator. You are not going to like what is on this drive. I sat forward, my hands clasped on the table. I did not pay you to tell me what I like, Vance. I paid you to tell me the truth. Is she just a gold digger or is she something worse? Vance plugged the drive into Jerome's laptop. He tapped a few keys and a financial profile appeared on the large screen on the wall. It was a sea of red ink. She is not just broke, Vance said, pointing to the screen. She is underwater. Technically, she is drowning. Sienna has $200,000 in student loan debt for a degree in art history she never finished. She has 6 maxed-out credit cards with an average interest rate of 24%. She owes $30,000 to a luxury car rental agency for a G-Wagon she crashed and claimed was stolen. And here is the kicker. She is currently being sued by her former landlord for squatting. She has not paid rent on her own apartment in 8 months. I stared at the numbers. They were staggering. My son was about to marry a financial black hole. She is marrying Bradley for the bailout. I said, my voice flat. She needs a host. It is worse than a bailout, Vance corrected. It is a rebranding. I looked into her influencer business. It is all smoke and mirrors. Those brand deals she brags about. Most of them are fake. She buys the products herself, tags the companies, and pretends they sponsored her. She buys followers. She buys likes. Her entire life is a Ponzi scheme of social validation. And the wedding, it is not a celebration. It is a content launch. She has already pre-sold the exclusive rights to the wedding photos to a third-tier gossip magazine for $10,000. She is selling access to your family like it is a ticket to a zoo. Jerome let out a low whistle. Selling the photos. That explains the no phones policy she put on the invitation. She doesn't want guests leaking her payday. Vance nodded. But that is just the numbers. The numbers make her a grifter. What I found next makes her dangerous. He opened a folder on his computer labeled Audio Surveillance. I followed her yesterday, Vance explained. She met a friend for lunch at a bistro downtown. A girl named Chloe, another influencer. They sat on the patio. I was at the table behind them with a directional mic. The audio is clear. I warn you, Clint. This gets personal. Play it, I said. Vance clicked the file. Static hissed for a moment, then the sounds of silverware clinking and ambient chatter filled the room. Then Sienna's voice cut through the noise. It was high-pitched, mocking the voice of a mean girl in a high school cafeteria. I am telling you, Chloe, Sienna said on the recording. I just have to hold out for a little bit longer. The old man is practically a dinosaur. Did you see the suit he wore to the engagement party? He looked like he smelled of mothballs and despair. I heard Chloe laugh. A cruel, sycophantic laugh. But he is loaded right. Bradley says he built half the skyline. Oh, he is loaded, Sienna replied. Her voice dropped lower, conspiratorial. But here is the best part. He is sick. I frowned. I was not sick. I had high blood pressure managed by medication, but I was as healthy as a horse. Sick, how Chloe asked. Cancer. Sienna lied. Smoothly. Effortlessly. Bradley told me he found pills in his bathroom cabinet. Heavy stuff. He gives him 2 years tops. Maybe 1 if the stress of the wedding gets to him. My blood ran cold. Bradley knew exactly what those pills were. They were for cholesterol. He knew I was fine. But Sienna was spinning a narrative. She was planting a seed. So what happens when he kicks the bucket? Chloe asked. Sienna let out a sigh of pure greed. Jackpot, baby. We get everything. The house, the stocks, the construction firm. I am going to sell that hideous house the day after the funeral. It is too woody, too dark. I want a penthouse downtown. And the money. Bradley is soft. I can get him to sign power of attorney in a heartbeat. Once the old man is gone, I run the show. I just have to play the dutiful daughter-in-law for a few months. Maybe squeeze out a few tears at the hospital bed. It will be great content for my vulnerability arc. People love a grieving bride. The recording ended. Vance stopped the playback. The silence in the office was heavier than before. It wasn't just silence. It was the vacuum left after an explosion. She wasn't just after my money. She was banking on my death. She was actively looking forward to it. She viewed my life not as a history of hard work and love, but as a countdown clock to her payday. And she was going to use my death as a content strategy, a vulnerability arc. The phrase tasted like bile in my mouth. And Bradley. I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Does he know she thinks I am dying? Vance hesitated. I have another recording, from the car ride home after that lunch. Bradley picked her up. Play it. The audio started again, the hum of an engine. Babe Sienna's voice was whining now. Your dad is being such a pain about the bill. Can't you just guilt trip him? Tell him his stress is bad for his condition. There was a pause. Then Bradley spoke. I tried. He is stubborn. But don't worry. I told him, if he doesn't pay, he loses us. He is terrified of being alone. He will pay. He always pays. He is desperate for me to like him. I closed my eyes. That hurt more than Sienna's malice. Sienna was a stranger, an enemy. But Bradley, he was my flesh and blood, and he was weaponizing my love for him. He knew I wasn't dying, but he was willing to let her believe it, willing to play along with her twisted game just to get his bills paid. He called me desperate. He mocked the very thing that made me a good father, my desire to be close to him. I opened my eyes. The sadness I had felt earlier, the lingering hope that this was all a misunderstanding, was gone. It had been burned away by the acid of their words. In its place was something cold and hard, a resolve like steel. "Turn it off," I said. Vance closed the laptop. "I have enough here to get a restraining order, Clint. I have enough to get her arrested for fraud. We can stop this right now." "No," I said. I stood up and walked over to the window, looking at my reflection again. The man looking back at me wasn't a victim. He was a general. If we stop it now, they learn nothing. They will just spin it. They will say I am a crazy old man who hired a spy to ruin their love. Sienna will cry on Instagram, and I will be the villain. I turned back to face them. Jerome and Vance were watching me, waiting for the order. "We are going to let them proceed," I said. "We are going to let them believe they won." Jerome: "I want you to prepare the papers for the trust fund freeze. But I also want you to prepare a deed of transfer." "Transfer for what?" Jerome asked. "For the house," I said. "Sienna wants to sell my house. She thinks it is hers. I am going to make sure she never sets foot in it. I am transferring the deed to the Patricia Reeves Charity Foundation, effective Saturday morning. And Vance," I continued, "I want you to make copies of those recordings, high-quality digital copies, and I want you to find out who the sponsors are for this wedding. The champagne brand, the dress designer, the venue." "I am on it," Vance said. "What are you going to do with them?" I smiled. A cold, dangerous smile. Sienna cares about her brand. She cares about her image. We are going to make sure her image reflects her reality. When the money runs out on Saturday, I want the sponsors to know exactly who they were supporting. I want them to hear her laughing about cancer. I want them to hear her admitting to fraud. I walked back to the desk and picked up the flash drive. It felt light, but it held the weight of a nuclear bomb. "They want a vulnerability arc," I said softly. "I am going to give them a tragedy." I looked at Jerome. "Do not send the payment yet. Send an email to the wedding planner. Tell them the check will be hand-delivered by me on the morning of the wedding. Tell them I want to surprise the couple." Jerome nodded, typing the note. "That buys us 3 days. 3 days," I repeated. 3 days to let them climb as high as they can. The fall will be that much harder. I put the flash drive in my pocket. I felt a strange sense of calm. The father in me had died the moment I heard Bradley call me desperate. Now only the businessman remained. And in business, when someone tries to hostilely take over your company, you don't negotiate. You scorch the earth. I buttoned my coat. "I am going home," I said. "I have to water the plants. And I have to pack." "Pack for where?" Jerome asked. "For the rest of my life," I said. I walked out of the office. The hallway was empty. The world outside was still gray and rainy. But inside I was clear. I was focused. The absence contribution fee was about to become the most expensive mistake of their lives. I wasn't just going to ban myself from the wedding. I was going to ban them from my life, my fortune, and my legacy. And I was going to do it with a smile. I stood on the sidewalk outside the skyscraper, the cold Seattle drizzle misting against my face. It felt good. It felt like a cleanser washing away the last traces of the sentimental father I used to be. Inside my coat pocket, the flash drive with the recordings weighed heavy against my chest. It was my ammunition. But ammunition is useless without a target, and I needed to lure my targets into the open. I needed them comfortable. I needed them arrogant. I needed them to believe that they had won so completely that they would never see the knife coming until it was already twisted in their backs. I pulled out my phone. The screen was wet with rain. I wiped it on my sleeve and stared at Bradley's number. For 28 years, calling this number had brought me joy, worry, or pride. Now it brought me nothing but a cold, predatory focus. I took a deep breath, closing my eyes for a second. I had to get into character. I had to become the man Sienna described in her recording. The frail, desperate, lonely old dinosaur who would do anything to buy a scrap of affection. I had to sound beaten. I let my shoulders slump. I let a tremor creep into my hand. I dialed. The phone rang 5 times. He was screening me. He was making me wait another petty power play to show me who was in charge. Finally, the line clicked open. "Make it quick," Bradley said. His voice was impatient, loud, competing with the sound of traffic in the background. "I am meeting with the florist. If this isn't about the transfer confirmation, I am hanging up." I swallowed the bile rising in my throat and forced my voice to crack. I forced a tone of hesitation and weakness that would have made the old Clint Reeves vomit. "Bradley." "Please," I said, making sure to sound breathless. "Don't hang up. I have been thinking about what you said. About what Sienna said." I paused, letting the silence hang there, letting him taste my submission. "You were right," I continued. "I am old-fashioned. I don't understand how the modern world works. I have been sitting here looking at the photos of your mother, and I realized something. I don't want to be alone. The thought of you getting married without me knowing, it breaks my heart, son. I cannot let money stand between us. You are the only family I have left." I heard the shift in his breathing. The irritation was replaced by a smug satisfaction. The predator sensed the prey was limping. "So you are paying the invoice?" Bradley asked. "The full amount, including the absence fee?" "Yes," I said. "Every penny. $315,400. I want you to have the wedding of your dreams. I want Sienna to be happy. I don't want to be the villain in your story anymore." "Good," Bradley said. His voice was devoid of gratitude, filled only with the entitlement of a prince accepting a tribute. "You made the right choice, Dad. Seriously. You were embarrassing yourself with all that drama earlier. Just wire the funds to the account on the invoice. Do it within the hour so we can clear the hold on the champagne." This was the pivot point. This was where the trap had to be sprung. I lied smoothly. "I went to the bank this morning. But there is a problem. Because of the size of the transfer and my age, the bank's fraud algorithm flagged the transaction. They think I am being scammed." I heard him curse under his breath. "Useless banks. So fix it. Call them." "I did," I said. "They are insisting on a face-to-face verification. I have to physically hand over a cashier's check. They won't let me wire it without a 48-hour cooling-off period, and I know you need the money now." There was a long pause. I could hear him calculating. He was greedy, but he was also lazy. He didn't want to see me, but he wanted the money more than he hated my company. "Fine," he snapped. "We can meet. But not at your house. Sienna is allergic to all that dust you have there." "We can meet wherever you want," I said, keeping my voice submissive. "I just want to hand you the check. I just want to wish you well. Maybe we can have dinner." My treat, of course. I could practically hear him smiling. A cruel shark-like smile. "Dinner, huh? Okay. If you are paying, we are going to Le Bernardin. Tonight at 8. And Dad, wear something decent. Don't show up in that construction jacket. Sienna is bringing some friends. Do not embarrass us." Le Bernardin. Of course. The most expensive seafood restaurant in the city. He wasn't just accepting the money. He was going to bleed me for a $500 meal while he did it. "I will be there," I said. "Thank you, son. Thank you for giving me a chance to fix this." "Don't be late," he said. "And bring the check. If you forget it, you are eating alone outside." The line went dead. I lowered the phone slowly. I stood up straight, the slump vanishing from my shoulders. The tremor in my hand stopped instantly. I looked at my reflection in the glass door of the office building. The weak, lonely old man had vanished. In his place was the Black Prince, cold and ready for war. I had them. Greed is a powerful blinder. It makes you see what you want to see. Bradley didn't hear a father. He heard a cash register. He didn't hear a trap snapping shut. He heard the sound of his own victory. I walked toward my car. Le Bernardin at 8 o'clock. Perfect. It was a public place, a place of high society, a place where scenes were frowned upon. It was the perfect stage for the first act of my revenge. I would sit there. I would endure their insults. I would watch them order the most expensive wine on the menu. And I would smile because I knew that this would be the last expensive meal Bradley would eat for a very, very long time. I opened the car door and got in. I checked my inside pocket. My checkbook was there. I would write the check. Oh yes, I would write it with a flourish. But the ink on that check would be the ink of a death warrant for their lifestyle. I started the engine. The engine roared to life, a deep, powerful sound. Enjoy the appetizers. Bradley, I whispered to the empty car. Because the main course is going to choke you. I pulled my 10-year-old Ford truck up to the valet stand in front of Le Bernardin. The valet, a young man in a crisp white jacket, looked at my truck with open disdain. It was clean, but it was a work truck. It had a few dents in the bumper and a rack in the bed for hauling lumber. In a sea of black limousines and Italian sports cars, it looked like a stray dog at a pedigree show. I handed him the keys and a $20 bill. He took them with 2 fingers, as if they were contaminated. This was the first test. If I had been the Clint Reeves of yesterday, the proud business owner, I would have snapped at him. I would have told him I owned the company that poured the foundation for this very restaurant. But tonight, I was not that man. Tonight, I was the embarrassing relic. I kept my head down, muttered a thank you, and walked inside. The restaurant was a temple of silence and money. The lighting was low, the tablecloths were blindingly white, and the air smelled of truffles and old wine. I spotted them immediately. They had chosen the best table in the house, a circular booth in the center of the room. Bradley was there wearing a suit that cost more than my first car. Next to him was Sienna. Even from across the room, she looked expensive. She was wearing a dress that seemed to be made of diamonds and dental floss, and her face was painted with the heavy, flawless makeup of someone who lives their life through a camera lens. Beside her was another young woman, Chloe, the friend from the recording. They were already drinking champagne. I walked toward them. My heart was hammering in my chest, not from fear, but from the sheer effort of suppressing my rage. As I approached, Bradley looked up. He didn't smile. He didn't stand to greet me. He just checked his watch. "You are 3 minutes late, Dad," he said. His voice was loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear. "We almost ordered without you." "I am sorry," I said, forcing a stutter into my voice. I rubbed my hands together nervously. The traffic on the bridge was terrible, and I had trouble finding parking before I realized there was a valet. Sienna looked up from her phone. She scanned me from head to toe, her lip curling in disgust. She didn't say hello. She just turned to Chloe and laughed. "Oh my God," she said. "I told you. Look at his jacket. It is flannel. He wore flannel to Le Bernardin." Chloe giggled, covering her mouth with a manicured hand. "It gives a very rustic vibe, like he just came from chopping wood." I looked down at my jacket. It was a high-quality wool blazer, but I had intentionally chosen one that looked dated. I pulled out a chair and sat down. No one offered to pour me a drink. The waiter appeared, instantly sensing the tension. "Can I start you with something to drink, sir?" the waiter asked. "Just water, please," I said softly. "Tap is fine." Sienna rolled her eyes. "Of course tap is fine. God forbid we spend an extra $1 on sparkling." She turned to the waiter, her demeanor changing instantly from mocking to imperious. "We will have another bottle of the Cristal. And bring the menu, we are starving." Bradley leaned back, swirling his glass. "So did you bring it?" I reached into my inner pocket and patted it. "It is right here, son. The check. I just wanted to have a nice meal with you first. To celebrate." Sienna scoffed. She picked up a breadstick and snapped it in half. "Celebrate what exactly?" "That you finally decided to stop being cheap. Look, let's get one thing clear, Clint. We are doing you a favor by letting you be here. This restaurant has a dress code. I am surprised they even let you in. You smell like sawdust and mothballs." I shrank back in my chair, playing the part. "I am sorry, Sienna. I showered before I came. It must be the truck." "Oh God, the truck," Sienna groaned. She turned to Bradley. "Please tell me he didn't bring that monstrosity. Bradley, if the paparazzi see us walking out to that thing, I will die. Literally die. It ruins my aesthetic." "It is just a truck," I mumbled. "It is reliable." "It is garbage," Bradley snapped. He took a sip of his wine. "Dad, you have millions in the bank. Why do you insist on living like a peasant?" "It is embarrassing. My friends ask me why my father drives a Ford, and I have to lie and say it is an eccentric billionaire thing. But honestly, it just looks sad." I looked down at my empty plate. I wanted to reach across the table and shake him. I wanted to remind him that the truck he hated paid for the suit he was wearing. I wanted to tell him that reliability is worth more than image. But I stayed silent. I let the insults land. I needed them to feel superior. The waiter returned with the menus and the second bottle of champagne. Sienna grabbed the wine list before Bradley could touch it. "I am ordering," she announced. "Since Daddy is paying, we are going to do this right." She ran her finger down the list of appetizers. "We will start with the Osetra caviar, the $200 portion. 3 of them. And for the entree, I want the lobster with truffle sauce. Chloe, get the Wagyu. It is only $300. It melts in your mouth." She looked at me, her eyes glinting with malice. "And Clint, you should probably get the soup. It is the cheapest thing on the menu, and it is soft. Good for your teeth." Chloe burst out laughing. Bradley smirked, looking down at his phone. "I will just have the salad," I said quietly. "No," Sienna said sharply. "You are not just having the salad. That makes us look bad. It makes it look like we are starving you. Order the Wagyu. You are paying for it anyway." I nodded obediently. "Okay." The Wagyu. The meal proceeded in agonizing slowness. They ate like kings, but they ignored me completely. They took photos of the food. They took selfies with the wine bottle. They filmed videos for their stories, careful to crop me out of the frame. I sat there eating my $300 steak, feeling like a ghost at my own funeral. Every bite tasted like ash. Midway through the main course, Sienna put down her fork. She dabbed her mouth with the linen napkin and looked at me. Her expression had changed. It was no longer just mocking. It was predatory. She wanted something. "So Clint," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Bradley and I were talking about the wedding gifts." I looked up, hopeful. "I am giving you the check," I said. $300,000. That is the gift." Sienna waved her hand dismissively. "No, that is the payment for the wedding. That is what you owe us for being a difficult father. I am talking about a real gift. Something that shows you actually support this marriage." I looked at Bradley. He refused to meet my eyes. He was busy picking truffles out of his teeth. "What did you have in mind?" I asked. "The Hamptons' house," Sienna said. She said it casually, as if she were asking for the salt. My heart stopped. The Hamptons' house was Patricia's favorite place. It was a beautiful, shingled cottage on the beach where we spent our summers. It was filled with her paintings, her books, her smell. It was the one place on earth where I still felt close to her. The Hamptons house, I repeated. But that is my home. I spend my summers there. You spend your summers sitting on the porch looking sad, Sienna said. It is a waste, a total waste of prime real estate. Bradley and I need a place to escape the city, a place to host parties, a place to build our brand. That house is perfect. It has great lighting. But it is full of Patricia's things, I stammered. Her art studio is there. So move it, Bradley said, finally speaking up. Put it in storage. Dad, you are almost 70. You don't need a beach house. You need a condo with a nurse. We are young. We are starting our lives. Giving us that house would be a huge tax write-off for you, and it would prove that you are not selfish. Selfish. The word hung in the air. I had given them everything. I had just agreed to pay a ransom for a party I wasn't invited to. And now they wanted the sanctuary of my dead wife. I looked at Sienna. She was staring at me, daring me to say no. Her eyes were cold, dead things. She didn't want the house for the memories. She wanted it for the status. She wanted to erase Patricia and replace her with a ring light and a tripod. I don't know, I said, my voice trembling. It is a big ask. It is the only ask, Sienna said coldly. Look, if you don't give us the house, maybe we should rethink your attendance at the reception. I mean, if you cannot support us with a simple piece of property, why should we let you breathe our air? She picked up her wine glass. Think about it. But don't think too long. We want the keys on Saturday along with the check. Consider it a package deal. I lowered my head, staring at the white tablecloth. I felt a tear leak out of my eye. It was a real tear, but not of sadness. It was a tear of mourning for the son I had lost. The Bradley I knew was dead. The man sitting across from me was a stranger, a hollow shell filled with greed and directed by a monster. Okay, I whispered. Sienna clapped her hands. Seriously, you will do it? I nodded slowly. If that is what makes you happy, if that is what it takes to be part of the family, I will sign it over. I will bring the deed on Saturday. Sienna squealed. She actually squealed. She grabbed Bradley's face and kissed him. Oh my God, babe, we are getting the beach house. I have to post this. She immediately pulled out her phone and started recording. Hey guys, big update. We just got the most amazing wedding gift ever. The Hamptons beach house is officially ours. Blessed, new home, Hamptons life. She didn't mention me. She didn't pan the camera to the old man sitting across from her. I was just the wallet. I was the invisible benefactor. Bradley looked at me then. For a second, just a split second, I saw a flash of something in his eyes. Guilt. Shame. But then Sienna grabbed his hand, and the moment was gone. Thanks, Dad, he said. That is cool of you. Cool, I thought. I just gave away my soul, and he calls it cool. The rest of the dinner was a blur. They ordered dessert. They ordered cognac. They laughed and planned how they would renovate Patricia's studio into a gym. I sat there and nodded. I sat there and absorbed every insult, every plan to erase my existence. When the bill came, the waiter placed it in front of me. $5,400. Sienna didn't even look at it. She was too busy showing Chloe photos of furniture for the new house. I pulled out my black Amex card. My hand was steady now. I paid the bill. I signed the receipt. I left a generous tip for the waiter, who looked at me with pity. I stood up. My legs felt heavy, but my mind was razor sharp. I will see you on Saturday, I said. Sienna waved her hand without looking up. Yeah, Saturday. Don't be late. And park that truck around the back. Seriously, I walked out of the restaurant. The air outside was cold and wet. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the clean rain. I walked to my truck and climbed inside. I sat there for a moment in the dark, listening to the rain drum on the roof. They wanted the house. They wanted the money. They wanted everything. I started the engine. I felt a calm, deadly peace settle over me. "You want the house, Sienna," I said to the empty cab. "You can have it. You can have the deed. But you will never step foot inside. Because by the time you try to turn that key, the locks will be changed, and the name on the door will be the Patricia Reeves Animal Shelter." I put the truck in gear and drove away. The waiter had looked at me with pity. He shouldn't have. He should have looked at them with terror. Because the old man in the flannel jacket had just baited the trap and the wolves had walked right in. The waiter cleared the plates, leaving only the polished mahogany table between us. It felt like a battlefield where the war was already over and the victors were just waiting for their spoils. I wiped my mouth with the napkin, letting my hand tremble slightly. It was a calculated performance. I needed them to see a broken old man, not the architect of their destruction. So Bradley said, leaning back in his chair and unbuttoning his suit jacket, "The food is gone. The wine is gone. It is time for business. Do you have it?" I reached into the inner pocket of my flannel jacket. I pulled out the checkbook. It was a simple leather-bound book worn at the edges. I placed it on the table. Sienna's eyes locked onto it like a hawk spotting a field mouse. She didn't blink. She didn't breathe. It was the first time all night she had given me her undivided attention. I opened the book and uncapped my fountain pen. The ink was black, permanent, just like the consequences they were about to face. I looked up at Bradley. His face was flushed with wine and greed. He looked impatient, like a child waiting for a candy bar. "Son," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "before I sign this, can I ask one thing, just one small thing?" Sienna groaned loudly. She threw her head back, looking at the ceiling. "Oh my God. Here we go, the string's attached." I knew it. There is always a catch with you people. "It is not a catch," I said softly. "It is a request. A father's request." Bradley sighed, rubbing his temples. "What is it, Dad?" "Make it quick. We have an after-party to get to." I looked him in the eye. I tried to find the little boy I used to carry on my shoulders, but he was gone, buried under layers of entitlement. "I want to come to the ceremony," I said. "I won't stay for the reception. I won't eat the food. I won't be in the photos. I just want to sit in the back row of the church and watch you say your vows. I just want to see my son get married. Please." The table went silent. For a moment I thought maybe, just maybe, there was a spark of humanity left in him. I saw him hesitate. He looked at me, then he looked at Sienna. Sienna didn't hesitate. She laughed. It was a sharp barking sound. "Are you kidding me?" she said. "We already went over this. The guest list is finalized. The seating chart is done. We cannot just add a chair. It messes up the symmetry of the aisle." "Symmetry," I repeated. "You are banning your father because of symmetry. It is not just that." Sienna snapped. "Look at you. You are depressing. You have this sad, lonely aura. It is a buzzkill. My brand is about joy and luxury and aspiration. You scream, past expiration date. If my followers see you sitting there looking like a lost puppy, it ruins the narrative." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a hiss. "You are paying to stay away, Clint. That is the deal. You pay, and in exchange you get the satisfaction of knowing you didn't ruin the most important day of my life." "Isn't that enough?" I looked at Bradley. I was giving him one last chance. One final lifeline. "Bradley," I said, "is that what you think too? That I am just a buzzkill?" Bradley looked away. He picked up his wine glass, swirling the last dregs of the Cristal. "Sienna is right, Dad," he muttered. "It is too complicated. Just sign the check. We will send you the video. It will be professionally edited. You will see everything. It will be better than being there. Better than being there." The words hung in the air. I nodded slowly. I understood. There was no redemption here. There was no love. There was only a transaction. And if it was a transaction they wanted, I would give them one they would never forget. "Okay," I said. "I understand. I won't come. I will watch the video." I looked down at the check. My hand hovered over the paper. I began to write. The scratching of the pen was the only sound in the universe. Pay to the order of elite events. I wrote the numbers carefully. $315,400.00. Then I moved to the signature line. This was the moment. The trap. I signed my name, Clint Reeves. But as I finished the signature, I added 2 small letters underneath it. A code. VA. Verification awaited. It was an old banking protocol I had set up decades ago for high-value construction contracts. It meant that the check was valid only if I confirmed it with a specific voice code on the day of the transaction. Without that call, the check was just a piece of paper. To them, it looked like a flourish of my handwriting. To the bank, it was a stop sign. I blew on the ink to dry it. Then I tore the check out of the book. The sound of the paper tearing was sharp like a bone snapping. "Here," I said. I slid the check across the table. Sienna snatched it before it even stopped moving. She held it up to the light, inspecting the numbers. Her eyes widened. A smile broke across her face, genuine and terrifying. 300,000, she whispered. "We are rich." She looked at me, and for the first time her smile reached her eyes. But it wasn't warmth. It was triumph. "Thanks, Clint," she said. "You finally did something right." She folded the check and shoved it into her designer purse. Bradley let out a breath he had been holding. He looked relieved. The tension left his shoulders. "Thanks, Dad," he said. "Seriously, this saves us. You really came through." I put the cap back on my pen. I put the checkbook back in my pocket. I felt light. The burden of hope was gone. "I hope you have a beautiful wedding," I said. "I hope it is everything you paid for." "Oh, it will be," Sienna said, already texting on her phone. "It is going to be legendary." They stood up. They didn't offer to walk me out. They didn't offer to shake my hand. They just turned their backs on me. "We have to go," Bradley said over his shoulder. "We have a table waiting at the box. Drive safe, Dad. Watch out for the rain." I watched them walk away. They looked perfect. Young, beautiful, and rich. They walked with the confidence of people who thought they owned the world. They didn't know they were walking on a trapdoor. I sat there for a moment longer. The waiter came over. "Can I get you anything else, sir?" he asked gently. "No, son," I said. "I am done. I am completely done." I stood up and buttoned my flannel jacket. I walked out of the restaurant past the valet, who still looked at me with disdain. I got into my truck. I didn't drive home immediately. I drove to the bank's night deposit box. I had one more letter to drop off. The deed transfer for the Hamptons house. It was signed, sealed, and dated for tomorrow morning. By the time they said "I do," the house would belong to the dogs. I drove through the rain, a strange song humming in my head. I wasn't sad anymore. I was excited. Saturday was 2 days away, and I had a front row seat to the show. They wanted a contribution. I had just signed the biggest one of my life. I touched the pocket where the checkbook lay. "Checkmate," I whispered. I sat in the booth for a long time after they left. I watched them weave through the tables of the crowded restaurant. They did not walk like a couple in love. They walked like business partners who had just closed the deal of the century. Sienna was leading the way, her hips swaying, with an arrogant rhythm, clutching her purse tight against her side. Inside that purse was the check, the $300,000 promise. To her, it was a ticket to freedom. To her, it was the key to the penthouse, the first-class flights, and the envy of her followers. She stopped briefly at the glass doors to check her reflection, smoothing her hair, making sure her victory looked perfect from every angle. She did not look back at me. Not once. Bradley was trailing behind her, his shoulders relaxed for the first time all night. He looked like a man who had just dodged a bullet, unaware that he had just stepped onto a landmine. The waiter returned to the table, looking at me with that same pitiful expression. He started to clear the empty champagne bottle, the one that cost more than my first work truck. "Can I call you a cab, sir?" he asked softly. "It is raining quite hard." I looked up at him. The mask of the frail old man was beginning to itch. I wanted to rip it off right there. I wanted to stand up and tell him that I didn't need a cab, that I could buy this entire building if I wanted to, but I held it for just a few more seconds. "No thank you, son," I said, my voice steady. "My truck is outside. I am used to the rain." I stood up. My knees did not creak. My back did not ache. The adrenaline of the hunt was flooding my system, burning away the fatigue of age. I walked out of the dining room, moving with a purpose that I had suppressed for the last 2 hours. I walked past the host stand, past the bar where beautiful young people were drinking away their inheritances. I felt like a ghost moving through a world that no longer made sense to me. A world where value was determined by likes and appearance, not by labor and loyalty. Outside, the valet brought my truck around. He parked it next to a sleek black limousine. The contrast was poetic. My truck was covered in road dust and mud. It was built for work. It was built to endure. The limousine was shiny, polished, and fragile, just like my son, just like his marriage. I tipped the valet, got in, and slammed the door shut. The sound was solid, reassuring. It was the sound of a steel cage closing. I merged onto the highway, heading away from the city, lights towards the quiet darkness of the suburbs. The rain was drumming a relentless rhythm on the roof, the wipers slicing back and forth like a metronome. I turned off the radio. I needed silence. I needed to think. For years, I had lied to myself. I had told myself that Bradley was just going through a phase. I told myself that he was just young, that he would grow out of the selfishness, that eventually the values Patricia and I had taught him would kick in. I made excuses for him. I bailed him out. I covered his mistakes. I thought I was protecting him. Tonight, in the glow of the dashboard lights, I finally admitted the truth. I hadn't been protecting him. I had been crippling him. I had fed the monster of his entitlement until it was big enough to try and eat me. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles turning white. It wasn't the money that angered me. Money is just paper. I can make more money. It was the disrespect. It was the way Sienna looked at me as if I were something disgusting she had scraped off her shoe. It was the way Bradley let her do it. He sat there and watched a stranger humiliate the man who wiped his tears, the man who paid for his education, the man who buried his mother. He chose a girl he had known for 6 months over the father who had loved him for 28 years. I thought about the check sitting in Sienna's purse. I imagined them right now sitting in the back of an Uber, probably laughing. Sienna was probably already spending the money in her head. She was probably planning which walls to knock down in the Hamptons house. She thought she had won. She thought she had outsmarted the dinosaur. A cold, dark laughter bubbled up in my chest. It wasn't a happy sound. It was the sound of a wolf that has cornered a deer. They didn't know about the VA code. They didn't know that the check was a dud. They were going to walk into that wedding on Saturday feeling like royalty. They were going to order the most expensive wines. They were going to sneer at the staff. And then at the height of their arrogance, the floor was going to drop out. I thought about the Hamptons house, Patricia's house. I remembered the summer days we spent there painting on the deck, watching Bradley build sandcastles. That house was a temple of love. Sienna wanted to turn it into a content creation studio. She wanted to strip the soul out of it and paint it white for the camera. Over my dead body, I whispered to the rain. I had already emailed the deed transfer to Jerome. By the time the sun rose tomorrow, that house would belong to the charity. When Sienna tried to stick her key in the lock, she wouldn't just be locked out of a house. She would be locked out of the future she thought she deserved. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. The last lingering trace of pity, the last small voice that said, "He is still your son," flickered and died. It was like blowing out a candle. The room of my heart went dark, but it wasn't scary. It was peaceful. In the dark, I could see clearly. I was no longer a father. I was a force of nature. I was karma. I was the consequence they had never believed in. I drove past the exit for Bradley's apartment. I didn't look over. I didn't wonder if he was home safe. I didn't care. He was on his own now. He wanted to be a man sign. Saturday would be his graduation day. I was going to teach him the hardest lesson of all. The lesson that the hand that feeds you can also be the hand that starves you. I pulled into my driveway. The house was dark, silent, and empty. But it didn't feel lonely anymore. It felt like a fortress. I turned off the engine and sat in the quiet for a moment. Sienna had called me a wolf in sheep's clothing once in a joke on her Instagram. She was wrong. I wasn't a wolf in sheep's clothing. I was the shepherd who had finally realized that the sheep he was guarding were actually rabid dogs. And the shepherd had put down his staff and picked up his rifle. I opened the door and stepped out into the rain. I didn't run for cover. I let the water soak my hair, let it run down my face. I felt alive. I felt dangerous. Saturday, I said to the night. Saturday was coming, and I was going to bring the storm with me. I walked up the steps to my front door, took out my keys, and for the first time in months, I slept like a baby. The kind of sleep you get when you know with absolute certainty that justice is coming. Saturday morning arrived with a sky so aggressively blue, it looked like it had been filtered through an editing app. It was the kind of weather that brides pray for and wedding planners kill for. The Napa Valley sun beat down on the rolling vineyards, turning the dew on the grapevines into millions of tiny temporary diamonds. It was beautiful. It was perfect. And it was completely, utterly fake. I was not there physically. I was sitting in my study, a cup of black coffee in my hand, watching the event unfold through the lens of a burner account on Instagram. I had paid for this show after all. It was only fair that I watched the opening act. And what an act it was. The venue, a sprawling estate that usually charged $10,000 just to unlock the front gates, had been transformed. It didn't look like a wedding. It looked like a coronation for a queen of a country that didn't exist. White silk draped every surface. It covered the antique oak trees. It covered the stone walls. It even covered the grass where the guests would walk, creating a pristine snowy path that cost $40 a yard. I watched the staff scurrying around like ants carrying centerpiece arrangements that were taller than they were. White orchids, imported from Ecuador, flown in on a temperature-controlled jet because Sienna had decided that local flowers were too rustic. I looked at those orchids on my screen. $15,000 worth of petals that would be wilting in a dumpster by midnight. They were beautiful, yes, but they smelled like arrogance. The camera panned to the reception area. The champagne tower was already set up. It was a pyramid of crystal glasses 6 feet high, waiting to be filled with the $8,000 of vintage champagne I had supposedly paid for. The bottles were lined up on a table, sweating in silver buckets. I zoomed in. Cristal. The 2014 vintage. Bradley had told me once that he couldn't tell the difference between expensive champagne and sparkling cider, but Sienna insisted on the label. It wasn't about the taste. It was about the photo op. It was about making sure that when the cork popped, the world knew they were drinking liquid gold, and the world was watching. Oh, were they watching? Sienna went live at 10 in the morning. She sat in the bridal suite wearing a silk robe with the word bride embroidered on the back in Swarovski crystals. She was surrounded by a squad of hair and makeup artists, a team of people whose sole job was to make sure she looked like a porcelain doll. She held her phone out, talking to the screen with that manic, high-energy voice she reserved for her followers. Hey guys, welcome back to the big day. We are officially live. Can you believe it is finally here? I looked at the view count in the corner of the screen. It was ticking up furiously. 800,000. 900,000. 1 million. A million strangers were tuning in to watch my son marry a woman who had called his father a dinosaur. A million people were liking and commenting, sending heart emojis and fire emojis, feeding the beast of her ego. Look at this view, Sienna squealed, turning the camera to the window. We are in the master suite of the estate. It is absolutely stunning. And guess what? This isn't even the best part. You guys know how hard we have worked for this. You know the struggle. Well, the universe has rewarded us. She paused for dramatic effect, batting her false eyelashes. We got the beach house, the one in the Hamptons. It is official. We are going to spend the whole summer there renovating. It is going to be the ultimate content house. I cannot wait to take you guys on the tour. I took a sip of my coffee. The bitterness was grounding. She was selling a lie. She was selling a house she didn't own to a million people who would never meet her. She was banking her entire reputation on a deed that was currently sitting on a desk at the county clerk's office, being transferred to a charity for stray dogs. The camera shook as she handed the phone to Chloe. Chloe, the dutiful sidekick, began to film Sienna as she stepped into her dress. The Vera Wang gown. $12,000 of lace and tulle. It was a masterpiece of tailoring, I had to admit. It fit her perfectly. But as she zipped it up, I didn't see a bride. I saw a parasite wrapping itself in a silk cocoon. Make sure you get the light, Sienna snapped at Chloe, her voice losing its sweetness for a second. The backlight is making me look washed out. Move to the left. No, the other left. She spun around, checking herself in the mirror. She didn't smile at her reflection. She critiqued it. She adjusted a strap. She smoothed a microscopic wrinkle. She wasn't happy. She was stressed. The pressure of maintaining the illusion was weighing on her. She needed this to be perfect because her entire life was built on the foundation of appearances. If she didn't look rich, she didn't exist. Downstairs, the groom was having his own moment. I switched feeds to Bradley's account. He was standing in the groom's lounge with his groomsmen, all of them wearing tuxedos that cost more than my first mortgage. They were laughing, clinking glasses of scotch. Bradley looked handsome. I will give him that. He had my chin, my height. But his eyes were glossy. He was drunk. It was barely noon, and he was already 3 drinks deep. To the man of the hour, one of his friends shouted. To the guy who landed the hottest girl on Instagram, Bradley raised his glass, grinning a lopsided grin. To the upgrade, and to the old man's checkbook, the room erupted in laughter. Bradley took a long swallow of the scotch. Seriously, though, he said, wiping his mouth. It was touch and go for a minute. I thought he was going to bail. But you know how he is. Guilt is a powerful drug. He paid for everything. The house, the honeymoon, the whole show. We are set for life, boys. Set for life. The phrase echoed in my empty office. He truly believed it. He believed that the signed check in Sienna's purse was real. He believed that the bank would honor a signature with a VA code that hadn't been verified. He was standing on the edge of a cliff, blindfolded, toasting to the view. The live stream cut back to the main ceremony area. The guests were starting to arrive. This was the parade of the vain. Influencers, minor celebrities, people who were famous for being famous. They walked down the white carpet, pausing every 3 steps to take photos. No one was talking to each other. They were all looking at their phones, checking their angles, making sure they were tagged in the location. It wasn't a gathering of friends. It was a networking event for narcissists. Sienna's mother was there wearing a dress that was too young for her, looking around with hungry eyes. She was calculating the cost of everything just like her daughter. She looked pleased. She thought she had married her daughter into a gold mine. She didn't know the mine had collapsed yesterday. The wedding planner, a woman with a headset and a clipboard, was running around like a general in battle. I saw her talking to the catering manager. I could read her lips. "Is the wire confirmed?" she asked. The catering manager checked his tablet. "It is pending. The bank says it is processing. We have the check number. It looks good." Processing. That beautiful, ambiguous word. It meant the system was looking for the verification. It meant the clock was ticking. In about 45 minutes, that status would change from processing to declined, and when it did, the music would stop. But for now, the music played. A live string quartet began to play a modern pop song stripped down to an elegant classical version. It was beautiful. It was expensive. It was the soundtrack to a disaster. I watched as Sienna emerged from the main house. She stood at the top of the stairs, the train of her dress cascading down behind her like a waterfall of money. She paused. She waited for the drone camera to get into position. This was the shot. The money shot. The moment she had been dreaming of since she found out I had a bank account. She began to walk. Step by step. Down the stairs. Past the fountain filled with rose petals. Towards the altar where my son waited, swaying slightly in his expensive shoes. The view count hit 1.2 million. 1.2 million witnesses. I leaned back in my chair. The coffee was cold. The show was about to reach its climax. They looked so happy. They looked so secure. They were floating on a cloud of my money, unaware that I had just turned off the fan. "Enjoy the walk, Sienna," I whispered to the screen, "because the ground is about to disappear." The ceremony had ended with a rehearsed kiss that looked more like a branding exercise than an act of affection. The guests had migrated to the grand ballroom for the reception, a space that smelled of expensive perfume and even more expensive lilies. The mood was electric, fueled by the open bar and the collective envy of 100 social climbers. Bradley and Sienna made their grand entrance dancing to a remix of a love song that was currently trending on TikTok. They looked invincible. They looked like royalty. They moved toward the head table, ready to accept the adoration of their subjects. But as they reached the center of the dance floor, ready to cut the 5-tier cake that cost more than a Honda Civic, the music didn't swell. It stopped. It didn't fade out. It was cut. Abruptly. The silence that followed was jarring like a slap in the face. The guests looked around, confused. Was this part of the show? Was this some avant-garde performance art? Then the lights shifted. The soft, flattering amber mood lighting that made everyone look 10 years younger flickered and died. In its place, the harsh fluorescent work lights of the ballroom slammed on. The sudden brightness was blinding. It exposed everything. The sweat on Bradley's forehead, the caked-on makeup on Sienna's cheeks. The illusion of perfection evaporated in a single second. A man in a sharp black suit walked onto the dance floor. He was not the DJ. He was the resort manager, a man named Mr. Henderson, who ran this estate with an iron fist. He did not look happy. He looked like a man who had just been informed that his bank account had been insulted. He walked straight up to Bradley and Sienna. He didn't whisper. He didn't pull them aside discreetly. He stood right there in the center of the room while 150 people watched. "Mr. Reeves," Mr. Henderson said, his voice projecting clearly in the silent room. "We have a problem. A significant problem." Bradley laughed nervously, trying to play it off. "What is it, Henderson?" "Did we run out of champagne? Just open another case. My father is paying for it." Mr. Henderson did not smile. "That is the problem, sir. Your father is not paying for it. We just ran the final authorization on the check number you provided." The bank returned a code. "Code VA. Void authorization. The funds have been blocked." Sienna stepped forward, her face twisting in anger. "What are you talking about?" "That is impossible." He signed the check. I saw him sign it. "Run it again. Your machine is broken." "We have run it 3 times, Mrs. Reeves," Henderson said coldly. "The bank confirmed that the account holder has flagged this transaction as unauthorized. Furthermore, the credit card on file for the deposit has been declined. Limit exceeded." He turned to the staff who were standing by the walls. "Pack it up," he ordered. "Service is terminated immediately." The room erupted into chaos. It wasn't a riot. It was a slow-motion implosion of dignity. Waiters who had been carrying trays of lobster and filet mignon stopped in their tracks. They turned around and marched back into the kitchen. The bartenders began corking the bottles of Cristal. One guest reached for a glass, and the bartender politely but firmly moved the bottle out of reach. "I am sorry, sir," the bartender said. "This is now private property." Bradley turned pale. He looked like a ghost. He looked at Sienna, but she wasn't looking at him. She was looking at the guests. She was looking at the phones that were still recording. "Fix this," she hissed at Bradley. Her voice wasn't sweet anymore. It was a guttural growl. "Fix this right now, Bradley. Call him. Call him now." Bradley fumbled for his phone. His hands were shaking so badly he dropped it once before managing to dial. He put it on speaker, praying that I would answer and save him. He needed the room to hear me apologize. He needed the room to hear that this was just a banking error. I was not at home. I was not sitting by the phone worrying. I was 3 hours away, sitting on a small wooden dock at a private lake. The water was glass still. The air smelled of pine needles and damp earth. I had a fishing rod in one hand and a cigar in the other. It was the most peaceful moment I had experienced in years. When the phone rang, I let it ring twice. I took a slow drag of the cigar, watching the smoke curl up into the blue sky. Then I swiped answer. "Hello," I said. My voice was calm, relaxed. The voice of a man without a care in the world. Dad, Bradley screamed. The panic in his voice was so loud, it surely echoed through the entire ballroom. "Dad, there is a mistake. The card, the check, they are kicking us out. They stopped the wedding. Tell Mr. Henderson it is authorized." I reeled in my line a little bit. The clicking of the reel was the only sound for a moment. "There is no mistake, Bradley," I said. "What?" Bradley choked out. "What do you mean? You signed the check?" "We had a deal. I signed a piece of paper," I corrected him. "But you didn't read the fine print, son. You never read the fine print. That check required a verification call. A call I chose not to make." Sienna's voice cut in. She must have grabbed the phone. "You liar. You old senile liar. You promised. You cannot do this to me. I have 1,000,000 people watching." I chuckled softly. It wasn't a nice laugh. It was the laugh of the wolf I had become. "I know, Sienna. I am watching too. The lighting is terrible, by the way. Those work lights really show your pores." "Listen to me," Bradley shouted, his voice cracking. "Fix this wire the money right now. Or I swear to God, Dad, I will never speak to you again." I paused. A dragonfly landed on the tip of my fishing rod. I watched it for a second. "That is the offer I asked. If I don't pay you, never speak to me again." "Yes!" Bradley screamed. Then consider this a bargain, I said, because I wasn't planning on speaking to you anyway. You wanted a contribution, I contributed a lesson. You wanted to live like a king, kings pay their own bills. But the house, Sienna shrieked. The Hamptons house, we have the deed. Oh, about that, I said. You might want to check the timestamp on that transfer. I donated the property to the Stray Dog Rescue Foundation at 9 a.m. this morning. You are currently trespassing on charity property. I suggest you leave before the dogs arrive. They are not as well trained as I was. There was a silence on the other end. A dead, heavy silence. The kind of silence where you can hear a heart breaking. Dad Bradley whispered, "Please, everyone is looking." I know, I said. And that is exactly what you wanted. You wanted to be the center of attention. Enjoy the spotlight, son. It is the last thing I am ever giving you. I hung up. I didn't wait for a response. I turned the phone off and tossed it into the tackle box. I looked out at the lake. The water rippled slightly. I had a bite. I began to reel it in. It felt like a big one. Back at the resort, the scene was descending into madness. I could imagine it, but I didn't need to see it. The guests, realizing there was no food, no alcohol, and no party, began to turn on the couple. The whispers started. He is broke. The father cut him off, so it was all fake. Sienna stood in the middle of the dance floor, her $12,000 dress looking like a costume. She looked at Bradley with pure hatred. She didn't see a husband. She saw a fraud. She saw a man who had promised her the world and delivered a bounced check. She screamed. It was a primal sound. She grabbed the nearest thing, which happened to be the wedding cake knife, and slammed it into the table. "You idiot!" she screamed at Bradley. "You useless, broke idiot! You told me he would pay. You told me you had it handled." Bradley tried to touch her arm. "Babe, please calm down. We can fix this. Don't touch me," she shrieked, shoving him backward. He stumbled and fell into the flower arrangement, knocking over a vase of white orchids. The water spilled over his tuxedo. He lay there wet and humiliated, looking up at the woman he loved. The guests began to leave. It wasn't a polite exit. It was an evacuation. Influencers were already deleting their posts. The live stream comments were scrolling so fast, it was a blur of mockery. Scam wedding, hashtag check bounced. Awkward. Sienna saw the comments. She grabbed her phone from Chloe, her hands shaking. She tried to end the live stream, but in her panic, she dropped the phone. It landed face up on the floor, broadcasting a low-angle view of her screaming face. "Get out!" she screamed at the guests. "Get out of here! Stop looking at me!" Mr. Henderson returned with 2 security guards. They were large men, devoid of emotion. "Mrs. Reeves." "Mr. Reeves," Henderson said, "you need to vacate the premises. The deposit does not cover the setup costs we have already incurred. We will be billing you for the flowers and the staff time. You have 30 minutes to collect your personal items." "Bill us," Sienna laughed hysterically. "Bill him, bill the old man. The old man is not the client," Henderson said calmly. "The contract is in your name, Bradley. You are liable." Bradley sat up in the puddle of flower water. He looked around the empty ballroom. The dream was dead. The silence returned, but this time it wasn't the silence of anticipation. It was the silence of a graveyard. He looked at his phone lying dead on the floor. He realized with a sinking feeling in his gut that his father wasn't coming to save him. The safety net was gone. He was falling, and there was no bottom. Miles away, I landed the fish. It was a bass, a beautiful, strong creature. I admired it for a moment, respecting its fight. Then gently, I unhooked it and lowered it back into the water. "You are free," I whispered to the fish. And for the first time in 28 years, so was I. The silence in the ballroom was broken not by a DJ or a toast, but by the heavy, authoritative thud of the double doors swinging open. Every head turned. The guests already whispering, and uneasy, parted like the Red Sea. Walking through the center of the room was Jerome Vance. He was wearing his charcoal gray litigation suit, a color that seemed to absorb the light around him. He did not look like a wedding guest. He looked like a judgment. Flanking him were 4 uniformed police officers and 2 detectives in plain clothes. The sight of badges and guns in a room filled with silk and flowers was jarring, a violent collision of reality and fantasy. I watched on my screen as my son scrambled to his feet. He was wet, his tuxedo stained with flower water, his hair a mess. When he saw Jerome, a look of desperate relief washed over his face. He thought the cavalry had arrived. He thought I had sent my lawyer to fix the misunderstanding with the bank, to threaten the hotel manager, to turn the lights back on. He stumbled toward Jerome, his hands outstretched. "Jerome," he gasped, his voice cracking with emotion. "Thank God you are here. You have to tell them. Tell Henderson who my father is. Tell them the check is good. They are ruining everything." Jerome stopped 5 feet away from him. He did not shake Bradley's hand. He did not offer a comforting smile. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a blue folder. The movement was slow, deliberate, and terrifying. "I am not here to fix the wedding, Bradley," Jerome said. His voice was projected perfectly calm and cold, reaching every corner of the silent room. "I am here to serve a warrant." Bradley froze. The relief on his face shattered, replaced by a confusion so deep it looked painful. "A warrant? For what? Dad signed the check. If there is a problem with the bank, we can fix it on Monday." "This is not about the check," Jerome said. He opened the folder and began to read. He didn't read like a lawyer. He read like a town crier announcing a plague. "Bradley Reeves, you are under arrest for grand larceny and corporate embezzlement." The words hung in the air. Someone in the back of the room gasped. What Bradley whispered. "That is insane. I work for the company. I am an executive." Jerome looked over his glasses. "You are a junior development officer. And according to the forensic audit we concluded yesterday, you have misappropriated over $200,000 of company funds for personal use. The Porsche 911 you drove here today, stolen company property. The 5-star trips to Vegas, unauthorized use of corporate accounts. The law calls that theft, Bradley. And since the amount exceeds $100,000, it is a Class B felony." One of the detectives stepped forward. He pulled a pair of handcuffs from his belt. The metallic ratchet sound, as he tested the locking mechanism, was the loudest sound in the world. "Turn around and place your hands behind your back," the detective said. "No," Bradley shouted, backing away. He bumped into the table, knocking over a tray of empty glasses. "Dad knows Dad gave me that car." "This is a mistake, Jerome. Call him. Call my father." "Your father is the one who signed the affidavit," Jerome said softly. "He gave us the GPS logs. He gave us the credit card statements. He is the primary witness against you." Bradley's legs gave out. He didn't fall. He just crumbled. The detective grabbed him, spinning him around. The click of the handcuffs securing his wrists was final. It was the sound of a door slamming shut on his entire life. Sienna was standing a few feet away, watching this with wide, horrified eyes. She looked at Bradley being manhandled by the police, and her survival instinct kicked in. She didn't rush to help him. She didn't scream for justice. She took a step back, then another. She was trying to blend into the crowd, trying to distance herself from the sinking ship. "I didn't know," she said, her voice high and trembling, addressing the guests who were filming her. "I had no idea. He told me he was rich. He lied to me too. I am a victim here." Jerome turned his head. He looked at Sienna the way a scientist looks at a specimen in a jar. "Mrs. Reeves," he said. "Or should I say, Miss Miller, since the marriage license has not yet been filed. Do not leave the room." Sienna froze. She tried to muster her arrogance, the same arrogance she had used to belittle me at the restaurant. "Excuse me," she snapped. You cannot talk to me like that. I have done nothing wrong. I am just the bride. If Bradley stole money, that is his problem. I am leaving." She turned to walk away, her long dress swishing around her. "Officers," Jerome said calmly. The other 2 police officers stepped in front of her, blocking her path. Sienna stopped, her chest heaving. "You are not just the bride," Jerome said, pulling a second document from the blue folder. "You are an accomplice, and you are a primary defendant in a separate action." He walked toward her, holding the paper up so the cameras could see it. "Sienna Miller, you are under arrest for credit card fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit wire fraud." Sienna laughed. It was a nervous, hysterical sound. "You are crazy. I never stole any credit cards." Jerome nodded. "You didn't steal the physical card, no. But you knowingly used a supplementary card issued to Bradley Reeves for unauthorized purchases totaling $54,000. The handbags, the spa treatments, the deposit for this venue. You signed Clint Reeves's name on the receipts. That is forgery. And since you crossed state lines to make some of those purchases, the FBI is also interested in having a conversation with you." Sienna's face went white. The makeup stood out in stark contrast to her pale skin. But I thought he gave it to us," she stammered. "Bradley said his dad was okay with it." Jerome closed the folder. "Ignorance of the law is not a defense, Sienna, especially when we have audio recordings of you discussing how to manipulate Clint Reeves and wait for his death to seize his assets. We know about the plan. We know about the vulnerability arc." Sienna looked at the phone on the floor. The live stream was still running. She realized with a jolt of pure terror that her followers were hearing all of this. The vulnerability arc she wanted was happening, but not the way she planned. She wasn't the grieving widow. She was the exposed con artist. "No," she screamed. "Turn it off! Someone turn off the camera!" She lunged for the phone, but the female officer caught her wrist. She twisted Sienna's arm behind her back. "You are hurting me," Sienna shrieked. "Do you know who I am? I have 1 million followers. I will ruin you." "You have the right to remain silent," the officer said, snapping the handcuffs onto Sienna's wrists. "I suggest you use it." The scene was absolute pandemonium. Bradley was weeping, his head hung low, being led toward the exit. Sienna was kicking and screaming, her wedding dress tangling in her legs, dragging on the dirty floor. The guests were backing away, holding their phones up high, capturing every second of the disgrace. As they dragged Sienna past the camera, she looked directly into the lens. Her eyes were wild, her mascara running down her face in black streaks. She looked like a demon being exorcised. "Clint," she screamed my name. "Clint, please, I will sign the annulment. I will give back the ring. Just stop this." I watched from my study, my face impassive. It was too late for bargaining. The time for bargaining was when I asked for a seat at the wedding, and she told me I ruined the symmetry. Jerome paused before following the police out. He stopped near the phone on the floor. He looked down at it. He knew I was watching. He knew the world was watching. He straightened his tie. "The show is over," he said to the room and to the millions watching online. "Please vacate the property. The charity needs to begin setting up the kennels." He turned and walked out, leaving the chaos behind him. I reached out and closed my laptop. The screen went black, reflecting my own face. I didn't look like a winner. I didn't look like a loser. I looked like a man who had cleaned his house. It was a messy job, but someone had to do it. The silence in my study was heavy, but it was clean. The wedding was over. The marriage was over. And my life, my real life, was just beginning. I took a sip of my coffee. It was cold, but it tasted like victory. The waiting room of the county detention center smelled of bleach and industrial floor wax. It was a sharp chemical smell that burned the inside of my nose. It was a far cry from the scent of imported white orchids and vintage champagne that had filled the air only 24 hours ago. I sat on a metal stool that was bolted to the floor. The cold steel seeped through my trousers, a physical reminder of where we were. I was not here as a father visiting a son. I was here as a witness visiting a defendant. When the heavy steel door on the other side of the glass partition buzzed open, my son walked in. He was no longer wearing the bespoke tuxedo that cost $5,000. He was wearing a bright orange jumpsuit that was 2 sizes too big. His hair, usually styled to perfection, was matted and greasy. His eyes were red and swollen. He looked like a child who had been caught stealing candy, except the candy was $250,000 of my money. He sat down and grabbed the black phone receiver. His hands were shaking so hard he almost dropped it. I picked up my side slowly. I did not say hello. I just listened. Dad, Bradley gasped, his voice tinny and distorted through the speaker. Thank God you came. You have to get me out of here. It is a nightmare in here. The guy in the cell next to me keeps screaming. You have to post bail. The judge set it at $500,000. I looked at him through the scratched plexiglass. I looked for a trace of the boy I used to take fishing. I looked for the young man I taught to drive. But all I saw was a stranger in an orange suit. I know what the bail is set at, I said calmly. I was at the arraignment this morning. I sat in the back row. Then why didn't you pay it? Bradley demanded, his voice rising in panic. Why are you sitting here? Go to the clerk, write the check, get me out. I leaned forward, my breath fogging the glass slightly. I am not posting bail, Bradley. The words hit him like a physical blow. He recoiled. What he whispered. But I am your son. You cannot leave me in here. I am not leaving you in here, I said. You put yourself in here. You and your greed. You and your entitlement. It wasn't me, Bradley shouted, slamming his hand against the counter. It was Sienna. She made me do it. She wanted the lifestyle. She wanted the followers. I just wanted to make her happy. I shook my head slowly. Stop it. Just stop. You are 28 years old. You are a man. Sienna didn't force you to sign those checks. Sienna didn't force you to drive a stolen Porsche. You did those things because you thought the rules didn't apply to you. You thought I would always be there to clean up your mess. I paused, letting the silence stretch between us. Well, the janitor has retired, son. I am done cleaning. Bradley stared at me, his mouth open. Tears began to stream down his face again. Dad, please. I am sorry. I will pay you back. I swear. Just get me out and I will work for free. I will dig ditches. I will do anything. You will pay me back, I agreed. But not with money. You will pay me back with time. The district attorney told me that with the evidence I provided, you are looking at 3 to 5 years. Maybe 2 with good behavior. Evidence you provided, Bradley choked out. You gave them the files, I gave them everything I said. Every receipt. Every email. Every lie. Why, he sobbed. Why would you do this to your own blood? Because I love you, I said. And that was the hardest truth of all. I loved the potential of who you could have been. But the money I gave you, it was poison. It made you weak. It made you cruel. It made you think you were a king when you were just a beggar in a silk suit. The only way to save you is to let you hit the bottom. And this, Bradley, this is the bottom. I stood up. My knees felt strong. The burden I had carried for years, the burden of his failures, was gone. I have spoken to Jerome, I said, looking down at him. He is drafting the paperwork to dissolve the trust fund completely. The remaining assets will be liquidated and donated to the scholarship fund I started in your mother's name. You are being removed from the company board. You are being removed from my will. Bradley's eyes went wide with terror. You are cutting me off. Completely. Completely, I said. When you get out of here, whether it is in 2 years or 5, you will be on your own. You will have $0. You will have no car. You will have no house. You will have to get a job. A real job. And for the first time in your life, you will have to earn your dinner. Dad, wait! Bradley screamed into the phone. Don't go! Please, I have nothing. You have your life, I said. That is more than you deserve. I started to hang up the phone. Dad, he screamed. I hate you. I hate you. I paused with the receiver halfway to the cradle. I looked at him one last time. I know, I said softly. But one day, if you actually grow up, you might thank me. I hung up the phone. The line went dead. I watched him scream behind the glass, a silent movie of rage and regret. I turned my back on him. I walked toward the heavy steel door. I didn't look back. I didn't cry. I walked out of the jail and into the bright, blinding sunlight of the parking lot. The air tasted sweet. It tasted like freedom. I had lost a son, but I had regained my dignity. And that was a trade I was willing to make. The sale of the house closed in record time. It turns out that when you are not trying to impress anyone, business moves quickly. I stood in the driveway of the estate one last time. The for sale sign had already been pulled out of the lawn, leaving a small, dark hole in the perfect green grass. The house stood behind me, massive and imposing. For 40 years, it had been a symbol of my success. It was where I brought Patricia when we made our first million. It was where I raised Bradley. It was a monument to the Reeves legacy. But looking at it now, empty and hollow, I realized it wasn't a monument. It was a mausoleum. It was a place where ghosts lived, and I was done living with ghosts. I turned away from the front door. I didn't feel a pang of sadness. I didn't feel the heavy tug of nostalgia. I felt lighter. It was as if I had been carrying a backpack full of bricks for decades, and I had finally set it down. The keys were in the lockbox for the new owners, a young couple with a baby on the way. I hoped they would have better luck with the walls than I did. I hoped they would fill the rooms with laughter instead of expectations. I walked toward my new home. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't a penthouse. It was a 40-foot Class A motorhome, a beast of chrome and steel that gleamed in the afternoon sun. I had traded the stationary prison of the estate for a palace on wheels. Inside it had everything I needed: a comfortable bed, a small kitchen, and a windshield that offered a different view every single morning. It was compact. It was efficient. And most importantly, it had no guest room. There was no space for ungrateful heirs. There was no space for society's judgment. There was only space for me. I climbed into the driver's seat. The leather was soft and new. The dashboard lit up like the cockpit of a jet. I started the engine, and the low rumble vibrated through the floorboards. It was a sound of power. It was the sound of a new beginning. I checked the GPS, destination nowhere specific. Maybe I would head south to the desert. Maybe I would drive north to the mountains. The Pacific Coast Highway was calling my name, a ribbon of asphalt stretching out between the cliffs and the sea. As I put the rig into gear, my cell phone buzzed on the passenger seat. It vibrated aggressively against the console. I looked at the screen. Unknown number. It could have been the press. It could have been a lawyer. It could have been Bradley calling collect from the county jail, trying one last manipulation, one last guilt trip. I picked up the phone. I looked at it for a long moment. This device had been my leash. It was how they summoned me. It was how they billed me. It was how they tracked me. I rolled down the window. The air was fresh and salty. I tossed the phone out. It tumbled through the air end over end and landed in a roadside trash can with a satisfying clunk. I didn't look back to see if it broke. I didn't care. The line was cut. I released the parking brake and pulled out onto the main road. The house disappeared in the rearview mirror, shrinking until it was just a speck, and then it was gone. I turned on the radio. Classic rock filled the cabin. I leaned back, gripping the wheel with hands that felt strong and capable. A smile spread across my face. It wasn't the polite smile I wore at dinner parties. It wasn't the forced smile I wore in family photos. It was a real smile. It started in my chest and warmed my entire body. I was 69 years old. I had lost my family. I had lost my home. But as I watched the white lines of the highway blur beneath me, I realized I had found the one thing money could never buy. I was free. The bill was paid in full, and the road ahead was wide open. I learned that generosity without boundaries is not love, it is self-destruction. For years I thought I was helping my son by shielding him from the world, but I was only feeding a monster that eventually tried to devour me. True family is defined by loyalty and respect, not by whose name is on the birth certificate. Walking away from Bradley wasn't an act of cruelty. It was the only way to save myself. It is never too late to rewrite your ending. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is close your wallet and open the door to your own freedom. If you agree that respect must be earned and not bought, hit that like button. Have you ever had to make a tough choice to cut off a toxic family member? Tell me your story in the comments below. I read every single one. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of justice and redemption. Until next time, remember, your dignity is priceless.